Relationships aren't built when times are good.
Yeah.
Relationships are built in the furnace of when things go wrong.
Travis Brooks-Garrett runs commercial for DP World, moving 10% of global trade through some of the most volatile markets on earth.
You can produce comprehensive customer decks the morning of the presentation without needing a 12-person graphic design team. I don't think there's any such thing as a loss. I think some of the best customers and projects that I've ever been part of is where someone 3 years ago has closed the book. Since then, we've developed a relationship and we're stuck onto it, and you cultivate a relationship with them background and you just come back better.
If you think you lost the deal and that means it's over, this episode will change your mind.
Welcome to the Revenue Leaders Podcast. I'm delighted to have you back. And this week we've got an incredible session coming up where we're going to talk a bit about the mindset of how to turn any form of challenge into an opportunity. And I love this concept, Regan, because in selling, we often find that things don't always go to plan. And so how we respond is actually more important than what is happening in the market. And this week's guest, Travis Brooks-Garrett, Vice President of Commercial for DP World. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you, Louis. Appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, we're pretty pumped.
Oh, so pumped. And I think that this is such a great topic because as much as we can have all of the writing down on paper, it's like what happens in those times of chaos, you almost have to throw it out the window and start again. So maybe to kick things off just for our listeners, love a bit of background on you and your role to start off with, and then we can jump in.
Yeah, sure thing. The industry that I'm in, we call it the Venus flytrap of careers. You never intend to get in there, but once you're in there for life. But yeah, the company I work for, DP World, it's a large global logistics business, one of the largest in the world. About 10% of global trade passes through our assets. Wow. And it's quite a diverse portfolio, so strong in operating ports, but also warehouses and transport assets. It really is quite a diverse company, and it's a company that inspires a lot of creativity. We call it this sort of entrepreneurial view, internal entrepreneurs, and that's kind of the mindset that we have from every level of the organisation.
Love that.
That's pretty cool, actually.
That's a really good intro.
Like that,
yeah.
Yeah, I've rehearsed that a few times.
I know, that's right. I should write that down.
Well, mate, I obviously, coming to this this session, we had a couple of ideas on what we could cover today, but I think one that I love, and just when we were in the green room and backstage, you mentioned a term that Chinese. Can you just talk us through that statement? Because I think it's a perfect segue into our episode.
Yeah, sure. So it's I don't speak Mandarin, but it's someone once said to me that Chinese character for crisis is the same as opportunity.
Yep.
Even if it's not linguistically correct, I still think that the spirit of that is something that really speaks to me. And really for me, it's about often we look at how do we disrupt an existing market. Where a lot of the vendors are already set in terms of market share, in terms of value proposition, and there's kind of a stalemate, in industry. I think crisis gives us the opportunity to reimagine that. It's when we're faced with a crisis that hasn't been forecast or hasn't been predicted. It's the great equalizer. And then it comes down to talent, and it comes down to creativity and how you can work with your customer in the moment, to try and, reshape their supply chain or in the context of my business, how do we problem solve?
Yeah.
I think the best commercial people, the best sales people are creative people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I think you find a lot of people who find themselves in a commercial role or a sales role have some sort of creative background, and I think that the ability to problem solve on the fly in a crisis, all competitors are in the same boat. I think that's really what separates the wheat from the chaff, to be honest. I think it's the best time to be in a role like ours, because it's not necessarily about what's happened in the past or whatever. It is your ability to problem solve in the moment, with your customer.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful, because I think from a sort of global or macro perspective, the global shipping, we've all seen it on the news, has been disrupted the last 6 months due to unforeseen events. I'd love to understand from your perspective, as that shift was happening and the challenges that created for your customers, how did you work with your team and mobilize them to, pivot from one strategy to now, hey, our customers are feeling some pain or there could be some uncertainty? Like, what was your process to get your team to sort of adapt to that same mentality? Because that mindset that you're bringing to the table, like having worked with so many sellers in my career, not all see it from that same perspective. So how did you get them to sort of shift their perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the best sellers being creative. I also think the best sellers are invested.
Yeah.
You're right, where it's the customer's money is your money. Their loss is your loss.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, when these crisis events happen, your customers will be working 12 hours a day to solve the issue for their management. You know what I mean? And it's, they're having to present board level presentations around how they can mitigate the impacts. And if you're not along for the journey and if you can't keep up, if you don't have the commensurate amount of investment emotionally and in the customer pulling through, then you'll lose them, because you're not there when it matters.
Yeah.
You're there when it's, you're taking them out for dinner and things are good and, you're trying to build a relationship. But, relationships aren't built when times are good.
Yeah.
Relationships are built in the furnace of when things go wrong. So I think that's, so talking to my team about, that when a crisis event occurs for your customer, you need to be equally invested.
Yeah.
You need to be along for the journey, right? It's not the time that, you switch off. And unfortunately, it's a sort of event where, if they're working longer and having to work harder and more intensely, then we should be next to them in the trenches doing the same. So otherwise you're not a partner.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're transactional. You know what I mean? And in the market today, transactional doesn't survive. So
it doesn't, right? And I think to that point, it really helps reinforce customer loyalty, right? I'd imagine, and I'd love to hear from you is like after that, what's the impact of that? Has it generated more customer loyalty? Has that reinforced some of those relationships with your clients?
Yeah, I think it has, right? I think ultimately, it is unfortunate that on both sides, in terms of customers and sellers, sometimes we have short memories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I do think the magnitude of some of the crises we've seen, recently with all sorts of different events, COVID, and it's one after the other. I think it's actually changed the mindset on the customer side now, where they are more interested in long-term strategic partnerships. We talk about it a lot, but I actually think it is materializing, in terms of the way people, contract with their vendors and some of the things they look for as well. So there'll always be that sort of price element, particularly with procurement-led industries. But the more that crisis becomes systemic, like we're seeing that every 6 months there's something new. You know what I mean? It really has forced the mindset now for buyers that, you do need to look at long-term partnerships and people, companies' ability to be adaptable, as I said, to stay along for the journey. It has moved into that partnership, more of that partnership approach.
Yeah, because I'd imagine originally, like, crisis management is essentially a piece of paper as a policy.
Yeah.
Now it's essentially a value add that, DP World and your sellers have to take to your customers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for us, it sits in some of our capabilities allow us to mitigate in the time of crisis because we do own and operate assets.
Yeah.
But I also think it's the largest asset we have is our people. And that applies to every industry. So, the mindset in that time, I think, is critical, right? There are certain players out there historically in a time of crisis where they switch on, great, this is the ability to exploit and make hay and I think that I think that's not the way things work these days. You know what I mean? If you do that, then buyers have the ability to punish you completely and totally. And I also think in a lot of markets too that the customer, at least in the B2B space that we operate in, there's a lot of consolidation.
Yeah. Yes.
So and yeah, I think that because of that, every industry leader I talk to, they always talk about their industry being a small world. Yeah. And everyone knows everyone. And I think it's got to the point now where that's probably a truism now for every industry, right? Everyone knows everyone. And yeah, so I think all of those things combined, the level of consolidation that's occurring in a lot of different industries, the fact that we have been through crisis after crisis after crisis, and the companies that have survived are by nature adaptable. And I think because of that has brought in a new era now where I think people are more strategically minded and partnership minded.
It's interesting, right? Because I think we often hear this. I don't hear it across so many sectors. Price is such a key reason why people buy. And I often think about it, and I think about their industry, and I'm like, okay, and I don't agree with that statement, right? We look at professional services, right? You can get a spreadsheet, and you can get 10 providers, the top 4 and the next 6, map them all out. They all offer very similar services, right? But there's a reason why people choose one over the other.
Yeah, I think that sometimes price is what people choose, but value is why people stay as well. And I think that, going to your point, Travis, it's that like that value piece. You can, I don't know how easy it is. I haven't tried to purchase logistics and supply chain to that magnitude, but I imagine that you could pick on price, but during that, crisis, they're the reasons why you'd end up staying.
I don't think it's binary, guys. I think two things can be true at the same time.
Love that.
Yeah, and I think that and I think it is a combination of those both things, almost in equal portions as well. I think that particularly for our really, really strong commercial operators in our organisation, they have the ability to build trust. They have the ability to build a relationship, but they also have the commercial nous to be able to unpack and present value, right? And I've got a great, mentor who said, Trav, sales guys grow on trees, right? But commercial operators, there's very few of them,
true.
right? So, but when you the power of having both of those things, the ability to do commercial analysis and to present that back to a procurement leader and in their language, in their format, but behind the scenes having really strong relationships with operational decision makers and executive leaders, where it is about track record and integrity and understanding maybe knowing about their families and having that sort of personal connection. The two things combined, when they're delivered together, I think that's kind of the powerful ingredient.
This is, we actually spoke about this on the way to this episode. We're talking about the importance of that the commercial capability, right? It's one thing having the sales capability of knowing what to say, when to say, but it's another thing actually having that next level of commercial acumen. I think for me, if I look at the sellers of the future, yes, there's AI and it's changing the way in which we engage with our customers and our buyers, but I fundamentally believe that the ones that invest in commercial acumen to really understand their customer, the commercials that drive them, make money, lose money, will ultimately deepen that relationship. It takes it to another level.
But I think like we talked about it, I think they have to happen in equal portions as well, because you might get a great CPA, great accountant who's, who can unlock value, identify and unlock value like nobody else, right? But if they can't communicate, if they can't earn trust or cultivate that that respect from the organisation and the ease of doing business, and I think present an authentically likable person, they might not get the deal.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And
So
we do see
it's
that. Absolutely.
We've seen how many times we've seen that doing win losses with decent sized deals. Great, very smart partners, super smart, but they didn't pivot or adapt the conversation when the customer went one way.
Totally.
They kept
the
path that they were.
stick.
Spot on. And there's the opposite as well, right? Where people are super charismatic, right, super likable, and then they don't, they can't provide the value proposition. They can't, really unlock and present value, or do commercial analysis. But this is where I think AI as well is, because I've got a lot of our guys who are, particularly some of our old school sales guys, right, who are, they've still got the Rolodexes and, and they still, they're from a world which is really relationship led, really, really relationship led. With Claude, they are producing amazing presentation decks, right? Whereas 2-3 years ago, they can't operate PowerPoint and struggle on Excel and, with the right prompts and the right tech behind you now, it's actually, it kind of, again, it's a bit of an equalizer, I think. So,
I love that, because we talk about like how AI kind of, can help push volume, and we've definitely seen that side. But I haven't heard necessarily the good stories of like where you've already got the real great human skills, like the adaptability, the commerciality, and how you can flip it to almost bridge some of those those gaps.
Yeah.
If we could just deep dive on the AI side and what you've kind of seen with your team beyond that example, like what are some of the things that you and your team have applied where you've seen that, real benefit?
So we've included it as essentially a KPI around AI-driven value creation, right, for our commercial. Because the whole thing is that it's still fairly new.
Yeah.
But once you're on it, you can't get off it, right? Because once you're off it, it's just like, what was it like before you had a laptop or a mobile phone?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it really allows you to work so much more productively, and it also, it also increases the quality of work.
Yeah.
You can produce comprehensive customer decks the morning of the presentation, without needing a 12-person graphic design team. It's those sort of elements, I think. So yeah, not forcing is probably the wrong word, but it's systemizing it and requiring it through, embedding it in a KPI just allows them to get on it. And then once they're on it, you don't really need that, right? Because they can, everyone, once they're on it, sees the value. And it's so I can't imagine where it's going to be in 6 to 12 months time, but already I've got guys who were, not exactly the best Excel operators now producing. What it means for me though now, I think that we're seeing decks get really, really, really big.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what, because they can, and it's easy to, and you can talk into your phone for 15 minutes and produce a 50 page deck. So I've actually said to the guys, listen, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
And where I've seen it worked best is where you can actually synthesize really, really complex ideas into a 1 or 2 page graphic.
Yeah.
That's where it's actually best, and that's where, you would usually go to a consulting company and, a BCG or whatever and do stuff that, you can now produce that sort of quality of work, which is able to synthesize really complex ideas down to really, really powerful sort of, graphics, right? So that's where I see it used best. But it's already become a big part of our organization in the day to day.
One of the things that I've found is whenever something new comes, you have those that adopt it with ease. They're like, like people like us, like we embrace stuff. But then you find that there's a group of people that are a little bit skeptical, and I find maybe because I've been in sales my whole life, I think salespeople are the most skeptical, right? They're like, well, I've done it this way for so long. Why do I have to change? In your experience, how have you gone? Because that's one of the biggest challenges that we have to help our clients overcome, right? Is they want to adapt something new, whether it's CRM technology, AI technology. The biggest sort of roadblock that can sometimes trigger status quo, not doing anything, is the concern around how do we bring our people on this journey. Given the role that you've played, do you mind sharing a strategy that you've essentially leveraged to bring people on a journey with you? And I know that you've done such a great job hiring A-grade talent and creating the A team. Could you just share with us, how did you do that, and what was your thinking, and how did you get people on the bus with you?
I think firstly just earning trust. And I think I've got a very simple view on this, where we only earn the true trust of the team when you win.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because we can talk about all the things in the world, but until they see it materializing in deals closing, the rate of growth accelerating, us being disruptive in the market and winning, they go, wow, this ain't just talk, right? And once you've sort of crossed that threshold, a lot of stuff's easier.
Yeah.
To be honest, really momentum builds momentum. So even if so I've been a big fan of finding ways to win easy quickly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Getting that confidence up, getting that trust in, and then they'll back you to the moon. When you walk into a room where where a strategy hasn't worked historically, or people or an organization that's not winning or has grown a bit stale, and you can see everyone blames everyone. There's finger pointing. There's distrust. This is where we talked about this earlier, but this is where email culture comes in.
Yeah,
where more emails fly around internally than they do externally, and it's all. As I said, for me the only antidote for that is find a low hanging fruit, find a way to win early, quickly, even in a small way, and then they go, wow, this is actually, there is a way out. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And then once you start winning enough and there's momentum. Yeah, that's when I think that there's a natural, authentic trust there.
Yeah.
Because I think people are used to seeing a revolving door of leaders with promises and verbiage, but people are smart, and people know what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
So when you look at when you look at your metrics and you go, actually, we are winning, we're moving forward, I think any sort of change from that point becomes easy because the trust is there and it's you've earned it and the team's got the right environment to embrace things and drive things. So
I love that, because it's really that any organization can have a vision, but if you've been able to back it with action that actually creates a positive output.
Yeah.
You're right. And growth mindset or not, generally that's kind of the people that follow that.
I think it's true, and I think that I'm big on we all have to manage and monitor inputs, but I'm obsessed about the outputs, and I'm less fussed about the inputs. And every organization's different, and their products are different, and the ways that they manage themselves are different. But I remember when I was on the road, I'd find, I might be only working on one or two deals at the moment, but I'd have the numbers to back it up in the background, right? And there's other guys that work very differently, and they have 50 deals going on at once, and you know what I mean? It's all, I think that I focus on the outputs, not the inputs, I think, right? But inputs are super important, right? And every organization is different, particularly an organization that's struggling. You need to go back to the inputs and go, how do we turn this around? And it helps you diagnose what's going right or what's going wrong. But yeah, we talked about earlier, like the email culture. Yeah. It's one of the things that, that I talk about all the time with my team as well. And an internal email doesn't constitute work.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't constitute work, right? An external email to a customer, sure, right? Yeah. But yeah, I asked the guys the question that, if you're sending me an email, is this something where you'd write me a letter? Would you sit down with a pen and paper and write me a letter? Because if you would, then that's an email.
Yeah.
If you're asking, if you're talking to me about a contract or raising an official concern or a business proposal or whatever, absolutely write me an email. But otherwise, pick up the phone, have a conversation, get me on WhatsApp. But yeah, so just to get the team obsessively focused on what's going to drive those outputs. And yeah, I think that that's the only way to move through the white noise.
That's actually a really good statement,
so
right?
Good.
Because you think about, and we've seen this, like, pardon the interruption, I'm Luigi, one of the co-hosts here at Revenue Leaders. You'll notice we don't run sponsors or ads on Revenue Leaders.
This show is free. Our goal is to help you grow revenue and build your sales system that you can rely on. We do have a favour to ask though.
If this episode gives you one clear idea that you can use, do these two things. First, share it with one person. a founder, a revenue leader, or a rep who wants to grow their business. Just one. That's how the show grows.
Second, grab free access to our vault over at coachpilot.com/vault. Inside, you'll get the frameworks, templates, and short courses we use with clients to help them scale pipeline and increase win rates.
So the deal is simple. If you get value, share the episode with one person and go to coachpilot.com/vault to get the tools to put this into action. All right, let's get back to it.
We've working with a couple of clients at the moment, and they're chalk and cheese. We've got one that accelerating like way past their performance metrics. Everything they set this year, they've exceeded. And yeah, the inputs have been important, but the output is incredible. The other business, much more established, not performing where it should. And that culture that you talk about, there's lack of accountability, lots of internal email dialogue, blaming, lack of conversation. Picking up the phone is like crazy. And
they'll block an hour meeting, but then that will take a whole 60 minutes.
But you know why? You know why
understand.
people write emails internally, guys? It's because they don't trust their colleague. Because they're wanting a written record of a communication because there's a trust deficit.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So once you breach past that, you don't need to write that in email. You walk over to the desk and you have a chat. You know what I mean? So
I really love where this is going as well, because if I look at even what we're building, the three of us, we actually don't send each other emails. It's like very rare. It's the only time I think that you're in an email is when I'm emailing a client.
Yeah,
like,
and otherwise I don't read your emails.
You wouldn't read my emails.
We've got Slack. If it's on Slack or on text or we talk.
We talk.
Right.
But there's a lot of trust there. There's a lot of trust there.
And you guys are problem solving together and you're working through. It's it's particularly when you're in the same building. Yeah. that's
I've seen it, but personally, I look, for me personally, email I struggle with because sending me long. I had something the other day. They sent me this long email. I'm like, that's a Google. Like, chucked it in a Google Doc or a Word doc because I've got to go through it. Like, and then somebody else is going to respond to this, and then I've got to take that. Like, this is the worst way of collaborating in 2026.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
It is inefficient. Like,
totally agree.
Shouldn't be operating like that.
But it goes to what Travis was saying in terms of what people are used to as well. So that I think, what we do need is commerciality will be a complete separator for the modern salesperson, but so will adaptability. And Gartner even spoke about this recently because there's so much change. Productivity levels have significantly dropped. And I really believe that's because of this whole thing of now AQ being a thing rather than just EQ and IQ. So, for people to kind of actually be like, just because we've done this, should we do it like this all the time?
But what I love about this conversation is that you can definitely see the leadership concept, and I can see this with what you're sharing and having, engaged with some of your team members is you've got that cascading throughout your business. Like, you're setting a standard, and we've spoken about this, the importance of standard from the top. Like for me, even though we're hiring salespeople, I'm running sales plays, and I literally like there's some admin I'm not good at, but when it comes to my CRM, my deal follow-ups, it's best practice.
It is.
Because I'm saying if you're coming into our business, this is the standard we expect.
And he holds people accountable. Like, that's what I love is that, and you've called me out. You'd be like, dude, like, we've got to do this from the top. And I love that.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that with Trevor. Like, this is, for me, I think any GTM leader listening to this, it's saying if we want to behave, like inputs, I'm the same. I love inputs, but I'm also outputs. If the output's there, the input's irrelevant.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
Because it means this is the number that we're holding. Success is a trophy. You look at World Cup, they don't care how they win it. They just want the trophy, right? The input to get there. Nobody talks about that. They talk about who was ultimately
the winner.
Who's the winner?
Yeah, that's right.
And so this is what I love. I think it's a GTM leader listening to this is thinking, geez, that standard that you're setting, it's cascading through the business.
Yeah, for sure. I have one more question as well. Like, we've talked about how you've had to manage through chaos and that. And obviously you do not have a crystal ball as to what's next. But what are some of the things that you're prioritizing, like leading into this, new financial year and beyond?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, it's gonna sound sort of countering some of the things I was saying before, but I said two things can be true at the same time. I really, really value creativity in commercial people and commerciality. Sort of what you were saying too. I think systems drive behaviours. And for the next, couple of months, I'm really revisiting some of the, how do we combine, this great culture of creativity and ambition and, the team are really quite energized at the moment and give them the right guardrails for next year to go and, perform and really, really nail things, right? So, for me in the next 3 to 6 months, I'm really focusing on scorecards, different type of scorecards that I can use for myself to figure out what's happening and how, what areas are we performing and what areas do we need to invest in. Commercial governance frameworks, really to give the guys sort of, as I said, the rule book, where they can play, how they can play, margin setting and these sorts of things. And then once the measure, the right, everyone's aligned in terms of how they're getting measured and I'm measuring them. Once everyone has the guardrails in place around what they can and can't do, go forth and prosper. Let's get some deals going. I love hiring deal makers. Guys that love putting deals together and not guys that like having coffees and lunches, but guys that like putting deals together. So
I love this, right? Because I'm a big fan. We've spoken about playbook. I love the concept of guardrails, like actually giving people, hey, this is how we play, and this is the place. This is the space in which you play in, right?
Yeah.
But you mentioned hiring deal makers, and I'm obsessed when it comes to sellers that can construct and
totally agree.
What are some of those characteristics? How do you find them? Because I think if you think about the interview process, salespeople, especially ones that have sold for a while, can sell themselves in an interview. But how do you look beyond the face of a seller to see, do they have the true skill set to execute my vision of what I'm trying to put together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there's a lot of guys that will massively Monty Python flying circus type stuff, overstate their day one, and I think you can tell pretty quickly around, you don't want to, I'm more interested in the people that are trying to understand our capabilities and how, so we're in the meeting, I'm in an interview with them and they're already sort of, you can tell they're thinking, right, you've got this, I've got this, I have these relationships and they're trying to pull it together like a puzzle. And we've all been through interviews where you meet a potential seller and they're saying, I'm the best, I know I'm the best, I'm going to come in day one and, change the world. And I think all that's good, but, the guys that come in and actually start putting the puzzle together. So they're asking questions about your business to try and understand, all right, how can I operate here? And they're already problem solving potentially for their existing network. They're potentially already problem solving for that. They've got deals that they're thinking about in their heads around, all right, if I do this and I move this over here and this is an interesting one. And, particularly roles which are incentivized through commissions and bonuses and that sort of stuff. You don't want to move companies unless you actually know you can win, and unless you actually you actually know how you can work with what I can offer in terms of capabilities and a brand and they're looking, wow, I'm actually excited to bring this to my network, or I can see a challenge here of. I can see how this could work. Does that make sense?
No,
the difference is,
I love that.
A grandiose promise, and a beating your chest saying I'm the best, or someone sitting there going, all right, well I can see how this could work. I could see how this could work for me is more from a person we're interviewing. I think is more powerful than a grandiose statement about being the best. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I've found that when I interview, you either hire the interview the ego or the person. When I interview the person, you find out and we've spoken about this before. I have a series of questions that I ask to bring out their curiosity, and if they've had it and that problem solving, they can connect A to B, come up with I guess a point of view. Whereas if the other one to the beating the chest, like ego, I just find them also dangerous for
hard to coach.
Hard to coach, closed mindset generally. They think they know better. And to be honest, like there's times where, like you're working with someone or you're being coached or given an idea, and I've done this before, or I'm like, oh, and I get my back up, I'm like, hold on a second, that's not me. Like, listen to this. Every opportunity is a learning opportunity.
But I think there's obviously confidence is important in selling, but I think there's a difference between being cocky and having that level of competence, right? Because competence is why we can be confident. Like I know if everything went to, crisis hit, pipeline crash tomorrow, I'm okay. I know the puzzle on how to put it back together to get myself out of a slump,
but
right?
You and I also have the lack of egos to be like, when something doesn't go well, pick up the phone and be like, hey, I messed up on that.
Let's get some coaching.
What would you do differently?
The growth mindset.
So I think that those things really matter. So to your point, and I guess that also helps contribute to team cohesion as well. Like I find like if you've got the alpha, it kind of separates that trust piece as well. Whereas if you have everyone kind of singing from the same hymn sheet, they trust each other, less emails, which would be great internally, and more emails externally.
Now, I've got a reflection question. So if you were to go back to the start of your career, now you've gone through an incredible life, going from contributor to manager to now a very, very senior go-to-market leader. If you'd be able to sit down with yourself who was just starting your selling career, what would be your top advice to yourself back when you first started on how to get the most out of this career?
I don't want to get too philosophical. I think for me, I wouldn't change anything, really. I think that it's such a, arbitrary sort of journey, where you find opportunities and it's almost like the universe has a grand plan. But it's, ultimately every time I've lost an opportunity or I've followed the wrong path. It's all of it's just been a great. I wouldn't want to give my young version of myself any advice because it would put me on a different path. But I think that, I think that a lot of people who are commercial leaders, I think both of you have been in the same boat, right? We've been in positions where you've had to sell to eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's a different mindset.
Absolutely.
Right? That's a different mindset. So I think that, once you have that naturally and you really understand human psychology and, without trading off your authentic self, because some people, in order to get to where they need to be, particularly where, they're on the road and they're trying to do deals, they try to be someone else. And that's, again, a path to, that's definitely the wrong path to choose. I think if you can maintain your authentic self, you've got that mindset where at some point in your life, you've had to sell to eat, metaphorically, I've never been in that situation, but what I mean? You've had to, that's been your, when you combine that then with, we talked about commercial acumen, really understanding value creation. Once you have those tools, I think that's where it becomes, I think that's a whole different level, right? And I think that a lot of the guys that, have progressed, in a commercial context, I think they have some combination of those three, right? They're unapologetically authentic. They are who they are. They've come from a position where they have been individual contributors, have had to sell to eat. Plus, then they've developed this extra layer of, commercial acumen, understanding how to work with internal stakeholders, understanding numbers. I think that that's something that is vitally important, particularly the further you go in an organization. I do meetings sometimes where I say to my guys, don't talk to me in words, talk to me in numbers. Because, when you are looking at managing businesses and things, sometimes the story doesn't, externally the story matters, but internally the story doesn't matter. The numbers matter, right? So, so I think those three things, right? Maintaining unapologetically your authentic self, understanding that what it is like to be on the road, and having that experience. And the third thing is really investing in and developing into that commercial acumen. So you can speak in numbers. If you're sitting in front of a CFO, you don't look like, you're talking superficially. You actually deeply understand the business, and understand the commercial drivers.
It's I love how you said, I wouldn't change anything. It's funny because somebody asked me that last week and I was very similar. And then it wasn't until I was I do a lot of thinking when I run. Running for me, something that's either on my mind or it comes back. And I think for me, the reason why I thought about it post, 'cause I'm like, the one thing that held me back was losing a deal. I used to take it personally and it stopped me from actually learning what I could have done differently. And I think there was a period of a couple of years there where I think my ego was like, I lost it. I didn't embrace that the loss is just as good as the victory.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you learn so much from losing a deal and pulling really cool insights that allow you to grow, right? And that was for me, that if I could go back to see myself when I first jumped on the phone, that would be like embrace the loss, because the loss is probably more important than the victory, right?
I think so.
Can I offer an alternative opinion here though? Because I've never met anyone like you that can take.
But you didn't meet me in my 20s.
Oh yeah, but now if I call you and I'm like, hey, here's a thought, and you're like an open book. You're like, oh, let me grab a notepad and I'll write notes. The amount of feedback you're willing to take or willing to receive to get better is there is no ego in that. So
but I think there was a period early in my career where I didn't have that growth mindset.
But don't you think that you ended up developing it to the point now where you're so zen about it? So it's I don't know if you would have got here if you went back and told yourself.
Well, there we go. That's the Travis's point. Right?
Exactly.
I wouldn't change anything.
I think that's true. But I think in the context of deals as well, right? I don't think there's any such thing as a loss, because it's not a closed. I think some of the best, customers and projects that I've ever been part of is where someone 3 years ago has closed the book, but then since then we've developed a relationship and we've stuck onto it, and then 2 or 3, and it's more genuine. And I've got competitors out in the marketplace that are scorched earth. Right, so if a client says no, they go scorched earth, or they don't extend a contract, they go scorched earth, right? And you can do that in certain markets, but not in our market. You know what I mean? So, so often the deals that we've lost today are relationships that we maintain in the background. You deal with it with honor and respect, and you keep in touch with the decision makers, and you cultivate a relationship with them background, and you just come back better. I don't think there's an opportunity loss, right? But I think that, it's the battle and the war type stuff. You know what I mean? It's
this is what we spoke about today. This is actually gold. We're going to clip that and we're going to repeat that to our community, because that is, we keep talking about the fact that a no today is not a no tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got to then earn the right to migrate that from today to tomorrow. And I just love the whole concept of this conversation. I actually think we could talk for another hour, but we've come to a point, mate, for our listeners, our community, where's the best place for them to engage and find you if they wanted to ask some questions or just generally reach out? Yeah, just LinkedIn, I guess, is probably the best place to start, I think. It's but no, thank you guys for having me. I think we, as a commercial community, appreciate everything that you guys do as well. And it's really, really great content, and I'm going to keep watching as well, and watching the other guests, and thanks for having me on the show. Fantastic. Thanks for being on our show.